What's up, everyone? Just hopping on. Didn't do the last 2 weeks, so getting back on the regular monthly or weekly cadence, actually, talking about tech sales. Let me get our favorite screenshot, rep view, top salary data. Let's see, yeah, it's been a busy past 2 weeks. I had SKO, sales kickoff, so I was in Florida for that, and then extended the trip through the weekend into Hawaii, or not Hawaii, did like Disney and everything. Super packed. And then, let me see, there we go. Yep. So did that, took off Monday and Tuesday, and then back at it with the swing of things. So super excited. So yeah, rep view, for people that don't know, they're like the Glassdoor, but for tech sales, compensation data. So tech sales or product management, two very different career paths, totally. So product management definitely is going to be usually more technical. When I was at Google doing GCP sales, I actually thought about transitioning to product management, but I actually didn't have the technical skills at that time. I didn't study enough for it. They actually have you do like coding interviews to get into product management there. Hey mate, new SDR here. You wanted to ask my thoughts about ABT, how you went about prospecting. So thoughts about ABT, the company, or prospecting, two different topics there. What should you expect for your third round of interview at a tech sales position? If your third step, already spoke with a hiring manager. So if you're on the third step, that's definitely a good sign. Means they probably want to hire you. I would assume at this point, typically it's going to be more just evaluating a culture fit. Also, when you get into like these later stage interviews, it should be more of you asking questions about the company, because you want to make sure that it's actually a good fit for you. They know that candidates are evaluating multiple companies, multiple offers right now in this economy. So definitely make sure you bring a lot of questions, smart questions, to ask the hiring manager. TechSalesTom, how's it going? It's going good. I've been very, very busy. Can you start as an AE if you have sales experience? Maybe. It depends. It depends on the product, for sure. It also depends on your prior experience. So, for example, if you were in insurance sales, for example, you potentially could start off as an AE at an insurance tech company, for example. So the best way to start off as an AE if you have prior sales experience, is to leverage your prior experience. Otherwise, if you're not leveraging your prior experiences or your connections, you're not really bringing too much to the table in terms of actual skills for starting off as an AE. Questions about prospecting. Yeah, happy to answer any questions about prospecting. In a contract role within trust and safety and trying to figure out the next game plan. Yeah, contract roles. So next game plan for sure should be to land a full-time position if that's the company you want to be at. Like, for example, when I used to work at Google, a lot of the SDRs, I think most of the SDRs were actually temps and contractors, and only like 15% or so converted to full-time engineers. So first of all, decide if that's the company you want to be at, and then two, decide what you want to do. If you want to continue down trust and safety, is that the company you want to be at? I think that's the first decision you need to make, is do you want to still work at that company or not? What's the T on Microsoft? Why is it that a lot of candidates from there are in some type of sales role? Microsoft's great. So, they, under Satya, they had like a really big turnaround. Before that, they kind of started to stagnate a bit, but they've been killing it the past 10 years. And why do they have a lot of sales? They have a lot of sales positions just because the products are fairly technical. So they have a lot of like product specialists in addition to like overall sales reps and account managers, a lot of like technical sales reps too. So, but they also have a lot of engineers. So they definitely do have more engineers than sales reps. So SMB, AE compensation at Salesforce. So it's about 50-50 there. So typical commission structure, base commission. Any opinion on Atlassian? They have great reviews on RepView. Yeah, I don't know anyone specifically that works at Atlassian, but they have like an excellent product. I've heard great things about the leadership team. So if you have an offer there, I would say they're like one of the top tier companies to work for. What company do I work for? I work for Amazon Web Services. Pray for Ukraine. Yeah, it's crazy what's going on there. I'm actually 100% Polish, so fairly close to Ukraine. My dad's actually in Poland right now, so hoping things don't get too crazy down there. Have I sold any SaaS products other than AWS? Yeah, so I've sold GCP, Google Cloud Platform. I've sold cybersecurity SaaS products. I've sold machine learning platforms, although I guess I don't know if that really counts as SaaS or not, but yeah, so I've been in a few different verticals. Can you apply for AE roles as a fresh college grad? You can, it depends. Like some companies actually kind of combine like the SDR AE role into one. Like they'll have different tiers of AEs. So depending on the company, they might not have SDRs at all. They'll have like associate account executives, and you kind of combine that function. You still close opportunities, but you're definitely focused on more volume and lower contract value opportunities. Thoughts on outbound versus inbound rep? Which is better? I don't think either one is better. They're both really important. Some companies will, like you see there, they will split outbound versus inbound. Outbound would be you doing the actual calling and emailing. Inbound would be you taking calls and taking emails from customers and qualifying that. So in some companies, those two positions are combined. So I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. Outbound is maybe potentially more of a grind, but you do get a lot of practice to work on your emailing and pitching skills, which are going to be really important and useful as you move on within your tech sales career. So I would say, like, if you want to be an account executive and a good account executive, and you have the option of choosing between outbound versus inbound, I would go with outbound, just because even though it's harder, you're going to learn more and it's going to make you a better sales rep. How do you prep for a mock call? You tend to get nervous when people are judging the call. Yeah, mock calls are always awkward. So mock calls would be when your like sales manager or one of your colleagues pretends to be a customer, and they're just always like really awkward, just because it's never going to be the same as like a real customer call. So being nervous is definitely pretty normal, especially if you're like a newer rep. I was just super nervous all the time, whether it be mock calls or customer calls or presentations. Man, my first like in-person presentation to executives, especially nerve-wracking. So the best way to prep is have like a clear outline in terms of like what do you want to do within the mock call. Start off with like setting like a clear agenda. Ask a lot of questions. Like try not to make it just like a word vomit, like one-ended type of conversation pitch. It should be like a two-way conversation with the customer or with like the mock person. So if you do that, that's going to make it go by a lot faster. You got into pre-hire, but you didn't have my high school diploma, so it fell through, but you're going to get a GED. Good luck on the GED. GED's a good equivalent to get if you don't have your high school diploma. A lot of companies don't require college degrees or anything, but I think it still would be beneficial to have your GED. As an AE at AWS, how much of the services do you actually need to know starting there soon as a BDR? So as an AE or as an SDR, you need to know about the breadth of the services, but you're not going to go like super in depth in each of the individual services. And the reason why is it'd be too hard to do that. Even like the solutions architects or the sales engineers aren't experts in all the various services. Instead, they're able to tap into a wide variety of different resources and other specific product specialists depending on the opportunity. So in terms of like the baseline level of knowledge, if you look at like the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification, they actually require that most reps get that within like the first 3 to 6 months. That's basically going to be like the depth of the knowledge that you need to know. And then you'll just learn more on the job as you're on like these technical calls with your other technical counterparts. Hey Tom, how do you like working with product marketing managers? Have you seen any switch to SE? I have seen a couple switch to SE, and the way that I like working with them is I like to be customer focused. So anytime that I can share customer feedback and provide input on their marketing campaigns, that's typically how I like to interact with the marketing folks. what's a typical day look like as an SDR? So as an SDR, your day is going to be fairly consistent. Depending on the company and depending on your goals, you might have to do between 20 to 60 emails and phone calls per day. They have automation tools that makes it fairly reasonable to attain. So you're going to spend, a good portion of your day doing that in Salesforce, updating records, replying to emails. You're going to have internal meetings. You're going to have continuous training for sure, internal training as well. So that's kind of like a typical day. And then you're in that role, for like 12 to 18 months, typically, if you perform well. If anyone is looking for a tech sales entry level, you're a recruiter for a tech sales company. Carson's in there. Mojito, Montijo's, the GOAT. Thanks for hopping on. First phone interview for HubSpot Friday. Any tips? Yeah. Tip would be make sure you can speak to everything very clearly on your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Everything is on the table for them to question. Set a good impression. Make sure you've done your research on the company, know what their products do at a high level, who their competitors are, what are their key differentiators. Have a good answer for like why you're interested in working for HubSpot. That's going to be like a common question, like why are you interested in this position, or why are you interested in sales at all? You're writing a few variants for cold email outreach, value prop first, or reason why you're reaching out. I would say start with value. So, people don't really need to know like why you're reaching out. It's clearly like a cold email, marketing email, or not a marketing email, but it's a pitch. People know that. You want to start off with, think of it from the customer's perspective. If you have an email in your inbox, you get a ton of emails in your inbox, right? Probably a majority of like the spam type emails you don't even read. You might read like the first like 5 lines of the subject line within your inbox. You don't even like click into the email, and you just go ahead and you mark it as read. So keep that in mind. And when you're framing and writing out your emails, focus especially on like the first sentence within the subject, and then also the first sentence in the body, and also like the first 5-7 words within the subject. Those are especially critical to make sure you actually capture the customer's attention. And then drive with value always. People don't really want to hear about features or anything like that. They don't necessarily even want to hear about like your name or your position. They want to know, why is this important to me? How is this going to help me like be better at my job, for example? Good question. With no university, where should you start to get into tech sales? Look at my playlist, Get Into Tech Sales. I have like a bunch of videos that I've put out. Take a look at that. I've got like a bunch of steps in terms of like how to prepare for interviewing at these companies, what positions you should be looking for. So the entry-level positions are sales development representatives, business development representatives. Most of the positions are posted on LinkedIn. So check out that playlist. If you have any other questions, feel free to like message me or join like the Discord that I have in my bio as well. People are pretty helpful on there. You could also try programs like, Pre-Hired or Pre-Sales Academy. Those are out there. If, for example, you don't get any traction, you're kind of like stuck after like 2 or 3 months of applying, that's when it could be a good option to look into one of those programs. And those are in my bio too. These just updated. Will I upload this live? Yes, I will be uploading. I upload all the lives. They're uploaded on my YouTube. I actually added like a button on my bio at TechSalesTom.com directly to the playlist for all of like the prior TikTok lives. So check those out. Never say reaching out because, reaching out because like those are basically just like empty filler words that don't really add too much value. So focus, try to be very concise. If you put out like very long emails with like 5 paragraphs that someone has to scroll through, they're not going to read through all of that. You'll be lucky if they read like the first couple sentences. That's really where you need to grab their attention and be like direct and to the point, because you don't want to make it look like a marketing spam email either. You want to make it look like a real email from another person. So think about like when you get your internal emails from like colleagues, for example, when you get like a really long email that's like 2 pages long. Do you actually read through it? Probably not. Usually you just kind of skim through it. I skim through a lot of those like internal emails. But if it's like a really short email from a colleague and has like a clear call to action, clear benefit, I'm much more likely to read that and actually respond. What's the difference between AE and customer success? Which is better? I wouldn't say one is better than the other. The key difference is account executives, they're pre-sales functions, so they are working with customers before they actually sign the contract and become customers. So they're pitching, they're finding customers, they're negotiating contracts, and then customer success, they're responsible for onboarding customers and making sure that they stay on the platform and they actually use the tools successfully. So customer success, hence the name. Which is better? It really just kind of depends on what do you enjoy doing? Do you like teaching more? Do you like onboarding? Do you like project management? Do you like being a bit more technical? Then you might be a good fit for customer success. If you like pitching, if you're really numbers driven, performance driven, money driven, for example, like you're really motivated by accelerators and out and like overperforming and earning more, then an account executive could be a better fit for you in that case. SaaS sales for 9 years in the construction industry. What should you expect in a new job now? So SaaS, it's going to depend on what segment you enter. So sales development representatives, the entry level role, they get paid between 60 to 100K on target earnings. When you go up into like an SMB, small and medium business account executive, they're making between 90 and like 140, 150K on target earnings. Then you get to like mid market, then you're at like 150 to like 220, 230, and then over here like enterprise reps, for example. These are, a lot of them are at like the 250 to 300K OTE mark. At some points a little bit higher, but that's fairly consistent. And then top earners, these are people that are, strongly exceeding their quotas. They're making, close to $1 million. Have I ever heard of a BetterUp? I think I have. BetterUp, are they a mortgage company? Dandruff, yes, I did. I was actually scratching my scalp. I got like this like zinc dandruff. We've had like this like really cold winter in Chicago, and it's just like really dried out my skin. So glad that the camera picks it up. How many buzzwords on average per email? I don't like using buzzwords. Try to cut down on the jargon unless it's like really industry specific that that the customer is going to pick up on. If you want to look at like a great course that I saw, Mailshake has a great cold email masterclass. It's totally free. I think it was like 4 or 5 hours of material, and they actually. So what they do is they have. They're basically like a mail automation tool, kind of like SalesLoft, and they've put out like a ton of great free content from all the data that they've learned from their customers using their software in terms of like what types of subject lines work best, what types of paragraph composition styles, buzzwords, email lengths, cadences, timing. So they go into that within the masterclass. So I found it to be super in depth, super helpful. So check that out. How many of you work for Salesforce and hit quota consistently? So Salesforce on RepView, I think when I last saw them on RepView, it was like 40% of reps hit quota. So consistently. Is dandruff a buzzword? It might be. That's actually a good question. Is that a buzzword? It might be. Or is it? It might be just a noun. Thoughts on HubSpot? HubSpot's great. They, what I really like about HubSpot, they're very big on providing value to customers, and you can tell because a lot of like the campaigns that they do, they're not even like selling their products directly. They're actually providing like really useful information that gives people a reason to actually subscribe to their newsletters and actually read and respond to them. So they kind of take like a very different like sales approach. So I'm a big fan of HubSpot. These just refreshed. Let me get through these real quick. Can you transfer to tech sales from a customer success background in enterprise software? Yeah, I've seen people make that transition. People like within the tech sales organization, there's a bunch of different roles. There's account executives, technical account managers, sales engineers, customer success managers, product specialists, and people will switch from from different roles. So usually the biggest factor is actually the level that you're at and the level of the role that you're looking to transition into. It's going to be easier to transition internally. So if you want to make that type of jump from customer success to like an account executive, I would recommend trying to do it within the company that you're at right now. Customer success tries to keep customers happy. Yes. Yep. You work for a mental health company and you're wary of sales jargon. Tips for humanizing outreach. Great question. So I'm like a big fan of keeping my messaging very simple and direct and to the point. Like you don't really need to like make the emails like overly professional. Like think about like if you're just like sending like a quick email to like a friend or colleague, like that's the type of like dynamic that I like to create with my customers, just because I think it just like cuts down like the unnecessary like formalities. Like really what I want to do. Oh geez, you guys hear that? I think there's gunshots right outside my apartment. Let me see what's going on here. No, it's Chicago, but for some reason someone's like launching fireworks. But anyway. Where have I been? Just busy. We had sales kickoff, account planning. I was in Florida for like over a week. Yeah, I thought it was gunshots. It like I saw like flashing outside the window, but like someone's literally just like launching fireworks right outside. Am I on PIP? No, I'm not on a PIP. Although you never know. My last performance review was great, but things can change fairly quickly. Our next performance review at Amazon is like, I think it's in April. So, how was SKO? SKO was fun. We were in where was it? Clearwater, Florida. I've never been before. Mostly been in like Miami when I go to Florida. So that was a ton of fun. It's kind of weird. Like our SKO was actually technically remote. Normally they bring in the entire sales organization from around the world to a single place. Instead, this year, because of Omicron and everything, we did like regional in-person events. So we had like about 40 folks or so from my specific sales organization. So it's a bit more intimate, but it was a lot of fun. And then ended up like extending and staying like, more days in Florida. How much do I make? Last year I made right at like 500K with accelerators. So I'm like at a 330K OTE. And then I exceeded my targets, got like 120% of quota. So made more than that. Those companies behind you, are they all hiring? Yes, pretty much all of these are hiring. So these are just some of like the top paying companies, but for like enterprise reps, enterprise software companies, they all pay fairly close nowadays. Do you travel and work remote too? Yeah, mostly work remote, but traveling is starting to come back into fashion now, just as customers are getting more comfortable. I'm actually going to be going out to Seattle mid-March for a week to do some customer executive briefings. I'm going to be flying out to Boston the week before that. We have an event in Germany, but I don't think I'll be going to that one. I have one of my German colleagues that'll be covering for me. You've heard sales for people that aren't that academic. Is that a fair criticism? I don't think so. I mean, I think if you want to be like a good sales rep, you actually have to be pretty smart. So like the top companies, the bar is actually very high. I would almost argue that the bar at the top companies for like enterprise sales rep is higher than it is for engineers, just because the number of positions for like enterprise sales reps is a lot smaller than there are for like sales engineers. And I do think like in some aspects the job is more difficult as well. So that might hold true for like some types of sales positions. I don't really like to discredit any specific job, but for example, like car sales, you could maybe say that's not as academic. But when you get into like the realm of like software sales, the selling motion is a lot more complex than you would think. Should you take a pay cut and work for Salesforce? It depends where you're coming from and how big of a pay cut. Like if it's going to be your first tech sales role, Salesforce is a great place to be. Definitely a lot of like career growth opportunities, great training, great mentorship, very solid product, good leadership team. You can be fairly competitive there, but if you have the drive, you can do fairly well. And then once you have Salesforce on your resume, it's going to open up a lot of doors to you. Don't see how it'd be worth it except for the name. Yeah, the name definitely goes a long way. So I used my first tech sales position was actually at like a fairly small cybersecurity startup, and once I got like the name recognition of like a bigger company like Google, for example, and then now like Amazon, it completely changes the game in terms of like recognition, in terms of like your accomplishments. Being like a top sales rep at a small startup is not nearly as impressive as being, let's say, like a mid-tier rep at a bigger company, just because the bar is actually higher at these bigger companies. You mentioned SalesLoft. Are you a fan? It's great for SDRs, but not a closing role. Yeah, I don't really use too many tools nowadays. The only tools I really use are, Outlook and then Salesforce occasionally. I don't even update Salesforce that often. And then use LinkedIn quite a bit because I only have like 2 accounts that I manage right now. So it's not high volume at all. So for me, I don't really need to use a tool like SalesLoft. But in prior sales roles, I have used SalesLoft and other sales cadence tools. So those are super helpful, especially when you're managing, let's say, 100 accounts. Even if you're not an SDR, if you have, like, for example, when I was at Google, my territory had, I think it was like 95 accounts. And I still found it helpful to do like various campaigns for like getting people to sign up for events that I was hosting. And then even just doing like various like sales plays and testing them out across accounts that aren't spending yet. You live in Chicago, you go to dental school in Downers Grove. Yep, yeah, downtown. I'm in downtown Chicago. You love the hunt as an AE, but man, you fear the PIP. Yeah, it's kind of it's one of those things where you can be you're only as good as like your last quarter or your last, half year, as they say. So even if you have like 3 years of solid sales experience and performance, as soon as your performance starts dipping down, let's say if you have like 3 bad quarters in a row, you're definitely going to get scrutiny from management, and that's when you might be on the chopping block potentially. So very high rewards as an AE, but the pressure is real. They pay you a good amount because they expect a lot from you as a result. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword there. What are my 2 accounts? I can't really say what they are. I don't think so. I've had people complain about my account, so I have to make sure in terms of like what do I talk about. But I manage. I'm within like the automotive team, so I can speak to that level. So two large automotive related accounts. Can I show the rep URL? Yeah, it's just repvue.com. Am I an enterprise AE? Yes, I'm an enterprise AE. You got a tech consulting gig, but it would be dope if we connect if you're ever in Chicago. Yeah, happy to connect. I've grabbed coffee with a few people that have reached out to me on Instagram. I've been meaning to set up like a happy hour. I got to figure out like a bigger venue or something. I put out like a poll on my Instagram, and I had like 500 people say that they would be interested in doing a Chicago happy hour. I don't think I would have 500 people show up, but I wouldn't be surprised if we had like 30 or 40 folks. So I got to figure out where I want to host that. We have common spaces in the building that I'm at right now. But I just got to make sure that management won't freak out with COVID and everything. Although it's starting to calm down quite a bit in Chicago. I think they're supposed to get rid of all the restrictions like next week. What about leisure travel and work at the same time? Yeah, if you're working remotely, like in sales, a lot of the work is remote. You'll occasionally travel out for conferences and to do customer visits, but other than that, you're basically working from home, and home could be where you live, or it could be pretty much anywhere in the country. One of my colleagues, she RVs full time. Like pretty much half the year she's like in Arizona, the other half of the year she's in Florida, and then between then, they're doing like road trips across the country, and she does her job from anywhere that she has internet access. And then as long as she's close to an airport and can travel within like 2 days notice, then she's good. How much did I make starting out? I started off as an application engineer. I did like a breakdown of my salary growth over the years. So as an application engineer, I made $62,000. This was in 2014 in Austin, Texas. And then when I moved into sales, I got bumped up to $67,000 at that company. So that's where I started at, and then it went up, a lot over the years. What are my thoughts on the Oracle class of program? Yeah, Oracle, great. I think Oracle's probably one of the best places to work straight from college. They have an excellent training enablement program. I know a lot of the reps that I worked with at Amazon and Google, they worked at Oracle at one point, and they were all great reps, and they spoke well of their experience and what they learned. Some managers, some environments I've heard can be a bit toxic there. Maybe a bit of like a bro culture, but it's a big company, so you can't really generalize the entire company with like such broad strokes. Like any company, when you get that big, is going to have some bad pockets here and there. Is it possible to get to your level of global AE at a major cloud provider without an SE background? Yeah. Most of the global AEs, like my colleagues, I don't know if any of the other ones actually have like SE backgrounds. I kind of have like a unique background where I've done both the sales engineer role and the account executive role, and I've actually switched back and forth between them. But definitely not required at all. Does Salesforce not pay well? No, Salesforce pays well, although a few of my followers that have like told me about entry-level offers that they were comparing, Salesforce did pay a little bit less than some of like, for example, like the high growth startups. I think they were like maybe like 10 or 15K less. But honestly, like in the long run, in terms of like your overall 10, 20 year career, making 10, 15,000 less your first year really isn't going to make that big of a difference. I would place more weight on like the training and enablement that you're going to get. That's actually going to be, I think, in my opinion, more valuable than an extra $10,000 that you might get, pre-tax working at a startup, which might not train you and provide the mentorship experience that you need to get to that next level. Because you got to think about, you don't want to just think about the role that you're considering right now, but you need to think about what's the next step after that, and then after that, like, are you going to be able to, like, if you get promoted at that company, are you going to want to stay at that company, or are you thinking about this position more of a stepping stone? So Salesforce definitely can be a company that you can spend 5-10 years in. If you do well, you get on a good team, you have a good supporting manager, your pay can go up quite a bit there. You were a sales engineer in the past, but you never made a ton. How do you transition to tech sales? Yeah, so if you've been a sales engineer in the past, the best way to transition, in my experience, is to start at get another sales engineer position at one of these like high paying companies. So, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, any of like, the companies here, get into a sales engineer position there, try to get on the enterprise sales team. And then your goal should be to kill it for a year, get as close as you can to the actual negotiating and the pitching as you can, and then aim to make a transition after a year, do an internal transfer to become an account executive, ideally at the enterprise level. That way, you don't have to start off at the bottom of the sales ladder, and because it's going to be very difficult to get into an enterprise sales position without prior closing sales experience. That's what they're going to be looking for. That was the challenge that I had when I was trying to go from a sales engineer to a sales position. Fortunately, Google, they were actually looking for more technical sales reps, so they recruited me as I was a sales engineer. But it was also like a fairly low level position too, so it wasn't too uncommon. Would you say an MBA is useful at breaking into more senior roles, say becoming a CRO? I would say so. I don't know. So I have my MBA. The value in terms of like what I learned is questionable. I think the biggest value that I got from an MBA is just building additional credibility, and then also the alumni network. Because let's say 10 years down the road, if you're in the running for a CRO position, they might place some value, some weight in terms of you having an MBA, just because that might look better to investors, right? So it's optics is a big portion there. So it at least kind of gets rid of like an artificial barrier that you might face. What's your position on tech sales versus software development? So, two very different positions. So software development, if you get into like the big companies, can pay higher, like more consistently, but the competition is actually really, really fierce. So I think it's easier to get into the entry level positions as a software development, but to actually like move up and get to like the senior or distinguished engineer levels is extremely difficult. So when you see like a lot of like those big software development pay packages, it's either people that joined startups really early that blew up, or they're extremely intelligent and they moved up the ladder and got to like level 6, level 7 at these big tech companies, and they got a bunch of stock that way. I think it's easier to move up the career corporate ladder in sales versus software development. But I think it also just comes down to, what do you enjoy more in your day-to-day? Do you like talking to people more, or do you actually like, if you like software development, like if you like that type of day-to-day, then definitely go for that. Oracle has an amazing reputation for training entry level. It has weight. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Oracle is, when sales managers are looking at a resume for a candidate and they see that they've worked at Oracle, especially early on in their career, it's almost like in my experience, it's almost like having another degree, for example, because they know that Oracle invests a lot in their corporate training and enablement. So just by you working there and having that on your resume, it signals that you've learned a lot of like best practices. You know how to work well in a well-oiled, well-functioning professional sales organization. So especially like if you're applying to other big companies, like for example, going from Oracle to like a Microsoft or Amazon or Google, that's gonna definitely help you out. What are accounts? So accounts would be what you sell into. So in tech sales, software sales, it's pretty much what they call B2B sales, business to business, as opposed to business to consumer. So we can draw some parallels. So business to consumer would be like car sales, insurance sales. So you're selling to other individuals. So in B2B sales, business to business, you're selling to other businesses. So you might be selling like a database solution to another tech company. So that company or whoever you're selling to, that would be an account. What does sales look like with only 2 accounts? How often do you have meetings? So I usually have 5, maybe 10 at most meetings per week. A lot of the time that I spend per week is actually doing like emailing and then setting up like the next meetings. So I have like a couple like executive briefings that I'm currently working on setting up and planning for mid-March. And then also with my accounts, since they're very big, a lot of the work is actually a bit more strategic in terms of like working on partnerships and new go-to-markets and code developments. So I'm doing a lot of coordinating with like internal stakeholders there. So like, this, like for example, today I had like 2 team meetings with both of the accounts that I manage. Had like a code development meeting, had a partnership meeting, and then like a planning meeting for the executive briefings. GCP versus AWS from a sales perspective. So I left GCP just as Thomas Kurian joined from Oracle. So I think the experience might be a little different than it is right now. But when I was there at Google, it definitely felt more of like an engineering organization versus a sales organization, meaning I didn't feel like the sales organization was as valued as the product and engineering team was, which is to be expected. Google is an engineering first company. I think they'll always be. Amazon Web Services is all about customer centricity. It's all about the customer, doing what's right for the customer, providing as much value as you can. And the sales function, I think they actually drive a lot of like the product development. So it's kind of like opposite of what Google does. Google tries to create the product and then find the market fit. Amazon starts the other way. They work backwards from what the customer wants and what they need, and they build the product from that. Like they have a working backwards process. So from a sales perspective, I think AWS definitely has a better enterprise sales organization. And then you can see that in terms of their overall market share and also the types of customers. GCP does very well with developers and small startups, but you'll see a vast majority of like large enterprises, Fortune 500 companies will use Amazon Web Services for a variety of different reasons. But one of them, I think, is because they have a more professional sales organization. Do customers prefer GCP or AWS? I think a lot of them prefer AWS. I've seen actually quite a few customers who try GCP and they end up like going back to AWS for a variety of different reasons. But it also just kind of depends on like how you're using the cloud. So at some parts of the cloud are being a bit more commoditized, but for the most part, people do prefer AWS. GCP is Google Cloud Platform. I saw a creator get a Lululemon brand deal the other day, and I thought of you. We need to get you that deal. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'm actually wearing another Lululemon hoodie that I recently got. It's pretty much all I wear nowadays. The Arc'teryx. I think that would be a cool brand deal. So I'll have to pitch them. I've actually mostly done like inbound brand deals, but I've heard from other creators the way to do it is really to find like some like dream sponsors that you'd want to work with that would be like on brand, and then you kind of approach it that way. You almost approach it like a sales deal. So you're prospecting, building a prospect list, outbounding, finding out who the right contacts are, and then building out the partnership that way. So I need to start doing that. Thoughts on Azure? So Azure is a very solid platform. So, GCP, AWS, Azure, they're all like pretty close nowadays in terms of performance. AWS has like the best availability and reliability out of the three. I would say the order, and I think Gartner has this listed in that order as well, where AWS is the clear leader. Then you have Azure, and then you have like GCP, and then like Alibaba, and like all these like other smaller cloud providers. Thoughts on software engineering transition to tech sales? Yeah, so if you're a software engineer, the most logical transition would actually be sales engineer. So sales engineers are like technical sales reps. They're, depending on the company, you still would be doing some coding, especially when you're doing like proof of concepts, doing pilots for customers. So definitely it's a good transitionary role. You still get quota and commission, but you have a higher base versus like a sales rep. Usually sales reps are like on a 50-50 base commission split. Sales engineers would be like on a 70-30, 80-20. They're expected to be kind of like the trusted advisor with their customers. So they're not going to be like as like pushy or closey as like a sales rep. So a lot of sales engineers have a software engineering background. Am I going to stay in sales? Yeah, I think I'll always kind of stay in sales. One of the things I want to do is I want to start my own company. Other than like the consulting that I do on the side right now. And sales skills are actually really important. Like early startups, a lot of like their first sales are actually done by like the founders. So like those sales skills are super important. You're also going to be selling the company itself to investors and other like VCs, for example, when you're raising new rounds. So I think I'll always be in sales in one capacity or another. Does GCP operate on a pay-as-you-go model similar to AWS? Yep, it's consumption-based, so similar type of model. They don't have as much granularity. I think it's more like pay by minute versus pay by second, depending on the service. But yeah, you pay as you go. Both of them, and most of the cloud providers, they also have like programs where if you commit to spending a certain amount per year upfront, they'll give you additional discounts on top of like the public pricing. But at its core, cloud at both companies is all about pay as you go, consumption based, preventing vendor lock-in, preventing people from having to commit to spending more than they're actually going to use. So a lot of great benefits to the cloud, especially for high growth companies who aren't really too sure in terms of like how much infrastructure they're going to need in the future. So it gives them access to a lot of infrastructure without having to pay for it until they actually need it. Good questions here. What's the persona of prospect for brand deals? Title, name? Yeah, so it depends on the company. So if it's like a fairly small company, the person that you're going to prospect into are usually actually going to be like the CEO or like the chief marketing officer. You'll be at that level. Other ways to prospect would be to even just, you just DM the brand on like Instagram, for example. I've done that I think I did that for Sonder. That kind of like fell off and you like recircle that, but that could be another way to prospect into. You could just mention that you're interested in starting a brand partnership, and that you can ask for them to put you in touch with the right person. I've also had luck where you could just use the contact form directly on the website, and the customer success rep might point you in the right direction. But there's usually going to be some marketing person or some social media brand manager. That's who you're going to be working with. How do you leverage your accounting experience? There's a lot of tech companies within the accounting space. So the way that you would leverage your accounting experience is you would look for companies that either sell to accounting firms as like their main target. So because that way you can leverage your experience as a buyer, or you can, so basically you're going to leverage either your specific accounting experience or also your experience, as what let me rephrase that. You're trying to leverage your experience as a buyer and also within the industry. So sales reps that are selling accounting software, for example, would greatly benefit from knowing exactly what problems their customers would be facing, and what would actually resonate with them and what do they do in their day-to-day. So that's how I would leverage that experience. We'll be done with the bootcamp soon. How do you get a job at Google as an SDR? Referrals for the big companies, you definitely want to get referrals. Referrals will go a long way. The big companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they get a ton of applicants, especially for the entry-level positions. So you almost need to get referrals just to get your resume really kind of like looked at, to be honest. Best questions to ask a company when interviewing for an AE spots. There's a lot of great questions. I like to focus my questions on like the territory, challenges that the territory has faced, especially if it's like a backfill position versus like a new territory. It would be great to dig in and understand what challenges did the prior reps face, where does the biggest white space lie within the territory, if you're talking to a sales manager, what are some of the traits that you've seen among your top performers? Where would you like to see improvements on the sales team, sales reps, those types of questions. And then you could also just ask like some other great questions would be, like if you're talking to a sales manager, like what are your favorite things about working for a company, XYZ? Or where do you see yourself, in a few years? Asking them about their career growth within the company. Do you enjoy working at AWS, or is it very stressful? I enjoy it. Last year with COVID, it was a bit of a weird year, but my managers were super supportive. The experience at AWS can vary quite a bit depending on who your manager is and what team you're on. So, and my experience has been good, although I've heard from people in other parts of the org that have had very different experiences. So that's why it's really important to vet out the company and vet out the manager when you're interviewing. So you have to remember that not only are they interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. Is quota related to your OTE? Mostly. Usually, it kind of depends though. But your quota would usually be anywhere from like 5 to 10x your OTE. So if you have a 300K OTE, you're gonna have anywhere from like $1.5 to $3 million OTE, but sometimes it might be as low as 1 million. It also just kind of depends on factors like average contract value, sales cycle length, and also what you're actually getting comped on. Like, are you only getting paid on like new deals? Is there a recurring revenue aspect to your quota? Is AWS having supply chain issues? Not that I've seen. I haven't seen any. Cloud is actually, tech I think has fared fairly well in terms of having to deal with supply chain issues. Just got 2 offers today after weeks of interviewing. Pumped to go forward with one tomorrow. Awesome, man. Congrats on getting the 2 offers. Interviewing is like a full-time job, so it's definitely hard to do that, but glad that you're able to get 2 offers so that way you can actually pit them against each other and actually make a good decision. These are great questions, everyone. So I actually didn't even realize we're at 10:30, so I'm gonna call it because I still have a lot of stuff that I need to catch up on tomorrow, so it's gonna be an early day for me. But thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to be posting this TikTok live on my YouTube channel tomorrow. So I have all my prior TikTok lives posted. I do these lives every Wednesday for the most part. The last 2 weeks were kind of an exception, but I try to keep this up every Wednesday. This is a Citizen Eco Drive. I haven't gotten to like the luxury watch game yet, but the supply chain issues that we were talking about are kind of annoying because like all the values are inflated. But anyway, we can talk about that later. But if you guys have any other questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram. I try to get back to everyone usually within a couple days. Sometimes it might be like a week or 2, depending on how backlogged I get. I think I have like a pretty big backlog right now I need to work through. Maybe I'll get through that tomorrow. But thanks again. I'll see you guys later.